share this with? Because
Yeah,
obviously,
sure.
okay.
Okay, I'll share now my screen. Okay. So, good morning, panel. I am Roy Joseph Guetta, and today I'm going to present to you a case study at which I was involved in during my time as a senior cost manager in Lineside. This is about a second floor office fit out in the Kingdom of Bahrain. In this case study, I will present or demonstrate my ability to critically analyze the key issue which I have encountered, the options which I have considered or formulated, and then the solution which I have adapted in order to achieve the client's objective, including the outcome and the lessons that I have learned during my undertaking of the task. The scope of the work is about fitting out the second floor shell and core area of an existing seven-story building with the category B fit out. The budget was set at 325,000 Bahraini dinar, and which was done during the stage one cost plan, at which Linesight was not involved, and the client has employed an independent cost advisor to set its budget. The GFA was measured at 780 square meters for the second floor, and the pre-contract program is started in December 2020, which lasted for 6 months, whilst the post-contract program was set at 12 months, including the 6 months defects liability period. You can see in this figure the as-built drawing which was provided by the client. These areas of space are desired to be fitted out, whilst the circulation area is part of the base build and is not part of the scope, was not part of the scope. So line sight was appointed from stage 2 until the tender stage of the project. And during the concept design stage, we have received this information from the architect. And as you can see, these areas here that were previously empty were fitted out or designed to be fitted out. The actual photographs of the office to be fitted out are shown in these images. As you can see, the office was bare, and there were some existing mechanical and services and electrical services, which will be used to facilitate the construction of the office fit out. The client objectives prior to the undertaken cost plan were set up, and in terms of cost, the cost to be within budget, and the time has to be within program, as the client intends to transfer its employees in a year time from a rented space to the area of office being proposed, and the quality was set at medium quality fit out. The key issue which I have encountered during this project was that there was a budget overrun apparent at stage 2 cost plan. As mentioned earlier, there was a budget of 325,000, and the stage 2 cost plan, which I estimated was 348,000, which attributed to a 23,000 cost or budget overrun. This was impacted by the following. First, the different approach in cost planning at stage 1, at which the client cost advisor didn't use a benchmark rate with similar projects, but instead directly prorated the remaining levels of the building against a single floor area of the second floor. And then there was a higher specification used in stage 2 design, which caused for the material inventory used in stage 1 to be unutilized. This is the summary of the breakdown of that 23,000 budget overrun. For overall fit out, this 7,500 was caused by the economies of scale being not considered by the cost advisor. And then the suspended ceiling cost a 10,500 cost overrun or budget overrun due to change of gypsum board to metal ceiling. And then the material inventory being not utilized during the stage 2 was 50%, and it attributed to 5,000 Bahraini dinar variance. resulting to this budget overrun 23,000. In order to achieve the client's objective, I have proposed 3 options. First is to request for additional funding, and this was justified by the different approach done in the stage 1 budget calculation. And this has eliminated 7,500 of budget overrun, and with 15,500, which I intended to be used for value engineering exercise. However, due to a lengthy budget approval that may occur when this is proposed, we have not selected this option, and move on to the second option, which was to revert to stage 1 design intent. Reverting to original design intent would reduce the cost, as this would reduce by utilizing the material inventory which was used in stage 1 design, and also it will revert back to the gypsum board proposal as previously intended in stage 1 plan of work. So there was a remaining 7,500 to be VE'd at that time, and however, when I proposed this to the client, he insisted to use the metal ceiling instead of gypsum ceiling. That's why we didn't use this as an option. After knowing all of these constraints, I have nothing to propose but the option 3, which was the value engineering and material inventory utilization. Material inventory utilization, which was also used in option 2. However, this one, the gypsum ceiling being converted to metal ceiling is considered in this proposal. So in this case, we have eliminated only the 5,000 material inventory cost overrun or budget overrun, and we have value engineered the 18,000 Barini Didar. And as you can see, this is higher than the other VE requirement for 2 options. However, we have selected this due to these 2 constraints that we have here, and I realized that in this option, there would be a minimal impact on program due to the commitment of designer to fast-track design. And in addition, the specification will just be a straightforward change. So we selected this option. And I've also explained to the client that value engineering is not just a mere cost-cutting exercise, but a systematic approach to achieve necessary function at the least cost. So this is the cost plan at various stages. From stage 1 budget of 325,000, we have when we move to the stage 3 cost plan after the client has approved the design for stage 3 using the value engineered works. So we have reduced it to 324,500, and further to that, after completing the stage 3, we have done the stage 4 cost plan, and we have further reduced to 315,000 by further value engineering workshops with the designers. So this is the graphical representation of the movement of the cost from stage 1 up to stage 4. My achievements were that in quantification and costing of works, I was able to supervise the production of BOQ and pretender estimates together with our team. And I had sensitive checks of the measurement in order to ensure that we will have a due diligence in terms of cost planning and cost planning exercise. And I have also demonstrated my ability to use the method of measurement to be adapted, such as the POMI. And I've also demonstrated my ability to do pretender reporting. In design economics cost planning, I have demonstrated my ability to have benchmarking, to use a benchmarking exercise for cost planning and value engineering exercise, and as well as risk management. For construction technology and environmental services, I was able to advise on choice of construction solution. For example, for fire suppression system, by using comparative cost analysis, I was able to demonstrate the most viable option that will be used for this particular product. So as a conclusion and lesson learned, prior to carrying out a cost plan, we must understand the client requirements so to avoid any dispute in the next level of cost plan. And then essentials of business opportunity, confidence, continuity, and relationship. We must always be aware of client care, and as a proactive, we must always be proactive in value management at the earliest to achieve the best value for money. For example, in the first stage of the plan of work, we must have a proper or appropriate value management in order to achieve the value for money for the client. Coordination, cooperation, and collaboration is essential to successful project. By collaboration with or cooperation with the various stakeholders, we can achieve the most viable or we can achieve the client's objective. And to avoid design creep in between two stages, I must apply the 30-60-90 principle, at which there will be an interim design for each stage so that we can achieve the objective of the client. And that's all. I welcome any questions that will come from the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy. I'd like to ask, I think we'll ask a few questions each, Roy. So I'll start with a couple of questions. When you refer to the stages of design, what is that in reference to?
It's the REBA plan of work of 2020, which is that this is the one we followed in order to have a systematic approach on cost planning.
Okay. You mentioned the client's objectives, cost, time, and quality. For quality, you mentioned a medium quality. Can you just elaborate on that, please?
This was included in the technical report provided by the designer. So in terms of medium quality fit out, he wanted the office space to be in between. In between the similar to the fit outs that were done in the other levels.
Is this a specification? This is more of a specification.
Yeah, more of a
issue or a quality in terms of
it's more
design.
of specification.
Okay. Okay. I've got one more question, then I'll let the panel ask some questions. You mentioned the budget overrun, and you said it was one of the issues for that was a different approach in cost planning. Now, can you just I need to want you to explain that a little bit.
Yeah.
There has been different approach.
Yeah.
It resulted in different figures. Was the original initial budget wrong?
Yeah, the initial budget was actually calculated based on a prorate of the same building that were being used. But I understand that it would be appropriate if we will have some benchmark rates of similar projects where it's only intended for single area. Sorry.
Was that incorrect then? Was the initial budget done by others? Was that incorrect?
I understand it's incorrect because the scale that was used is directly prorated. So there will be some sort of difference as the area of the entire building was 2,500, I believe 3,200 something, and as compared to 800 square meter, there would be a difference in terms of economies of scale because the larger the area, the cost will be less. So that's the reason for the budget overrun.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Roy. I have a couple of questions for you as well. Towards the end of your presentation, you mentioned that there was, I think, the stage 3 cost plan. You managed to get it down to 315,000 dinar, which was within the budget, and you achieved this through further value engineering changes. Could you tell me what some of these changes were?
Yeah, these are the changes to the lighting, some MEP works, and which we coordinated with the This was coming from the proposal from the design team. And during the workshops, there are several items which we have checked. And then as a cost consultant, I was the one assigned to make a cost comparative analysis. And in terms of design, the design team was able to, when they proposed some options like 3 options or 4 options, it depends on the materials that are available in the market. So I was able to advise on which product is the most preferable product that can achieve the least cost.
Okay, so well, you answered my next question there as well, which was what was your process in there, which is good. So, Jamie, do you have anything?
Yeah, Roy, in the project itself, you stated it was category B. Can you explain what that is?
Category fit out would include the full fit out of the an office or a space. It would include the furnitures, the loose FF&E, and everything in it.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Good, yeah. You mentioned as well that obviously economies of scale wasn't factored in with the benchmarking, but you did say in the case in your actual submission that your estimate increased primarily due to rectification work and increased preliminary work.
Yeah.
How did you cost for those?
The increased preliminary work, rectification works.
How did you cost for those?
Yeah, this was evident when there were some areas there that are required to be demolished. So, like for example, there were black works that there were required to be removed. So, in order to adapt the design of the architect, but this was just minimal. But in terms of time done on removing them. But when in terms of cost, there was an additional cost on that. And for preliminaries, I think when in talking about the economies of scale, preliminaries would also be affected because the less the area. Yeah.
Okay, so how did you actually get to the figure for each of those?
Yeah, when I did an elemental estimate because it's a concept plan. So I don't have that enough detail to estimate them. So I have used the elemental.
Okay. And you mentioned that you had overseen the preparation of the bill of quantities. What stage did you do that at?
I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question, sir?
What stage did you prepare the bill of quantities or oversee preparation of the bill of quantities?
Okay. So this is the based on the POMI. After we've done the stage 4 cost plan, this was incorporated to a POMI format because previously we were using NRMN. Yeah.
And it was measured under POMI. What section under POMI would you see your issue was in relation to ceilings? What section
in relation
under POMI?
To this, we have the some what they call this masonry. We have finishes. And we also have, like structural metalworks, non-structural metalworks. So those are the items.
So the final ceiling was the MS ceiling. What section did you measure that under?
Which one? The
MS ceiling.
The ceiling. Which section?
Which sections would that be measured under in POMI?
And finishing and finishes, internal finishes.
Okay. And just one more. You said, I noticed in the appendix B that you showed the movement from stage 1 to stage 4. Professional fees and inflation were excluded. Why was that?
This was a preference of the client not to include it. During the brief, we asked about this, whether we should include the inflation. However, based on our meeting, we were clarified that we can exclude for at the moment the inflation, but that was we have included that into our report that we have excluded it, but in case in case that would be part of the cost, at least we have we have a caveat on the report that
Okay.
inflations are included.
No problem. Yeah, I have no further questions then.
One quick one. Roy, do you think it was a good idea for the client to exclude inflation and professional fees?
I think no, because I believe that we must include it as this will also be part of the cost that he will he will expend during the process. However,
Okay.
to comply with his brief, so
That's
we
fine. Roy, you've answered the question. That's fine.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roy. Roy, we'll tackle a few mandatory competencies. A couple of questions. So you have a client who approaches you for quantity surveying services. How would you describe to that client what your services are and what the cost of those services will be? How would you portray that to the client?
As a quantity surveyor, my services would include cost management. What else? Also,
What document would you use to portray what services your firm would offer?
we have this RICS quantity surveyor scope of works that I can provide. So there's
Okay.
a standard.
Okay. So have you ever heard of fee proposals? Would that
Yeah.
would it be a fee proposal but based on the RICS scope of works, which is okay. In terms of you said in your case study, just saying you mentioned that you supervised some surveyors, surveyors. What techniques did you use to monitor their work and the quality of their work?
Yeah, this is done by checking the high-level check of the quantities, like or the cost. If ever I see that the cost is not within the benchmark, so I would investigate what's the cause of the problem, what's the cause why it's higher. So,
sorry, I'm sorry. It's not. It's more of a team working question. How did you establish the outputs of your team? How did you communicate with them?
Yeah.
What was
Okay.
to
I've
ensure
done
that
that by liaising all with all our teams to ensure that the quantities are checked carefully and with due diligence, and we must make sure that the documents are understood very well. Like if there are some drawings that are missing, we must ask the design team if there were drawings that are missing, or we must do it via RFI, request for information. And if it's not, if there's if it cannot be understood, we must always coordinate with each other.
Okay. In terms of accounting principles and procedures, do you understand? Can you explain what a profit and loss account is?
Yeah, a profit and loss account is a statement at which you will see we call this the income and the expenditures of a company at a certain point in time, and including the profit that a business will make. So it's a given point.
Okay. How do you ensure the data that you receive from clients is held securely?
I will do it by using passwords on my computer. As we in our company we have this we are using SharePoint, and where only those who are allowed or authorized to access it can use it. So that's how we protect the information that are very confidential.
Why is it important to protect data?
It's important to protect data in order to make sure that the confidentiality of the client is protected, because this is part of the RICS ethical standards to protect the confidentiality of your client.
Okay, thank you, Roy. We'll move on to some technical competency questions. So I think Jamie, you want to go first?
Yeah.
Or yeah.
Yeah, Roy, in your cost planning, have you ever come across provisional funds?
And what
And what
in the
are
cost
they?
planning? These are the sum of money that are being stipulated in a bill of quantities for those works that are defined. However, there's not much enough detail for you to estimate it. So we allow it in order to as a risk for as a form of risk.
Okay. And is there different types of provisional funds?
There are two. These are the defined and undefined. So
Yep,
for
that's
undefined,
correct.
it's the contingency that you put in the cost plan.
Yeah. You mentioned in your summary of experience that you prepared a cost plan for mixed-use facilities. So what key parameters would influence your construction cost when you're doing an estimate? Yeah. So if you're using the benchmark rate, what do you need to consider might affect that rate?
Yeah, the mixed use facility that when I consider estimating of our cost plan of a mixed use facility, I considered benchmark rates from different projects of the I mean from projects of from benchmark of projects with similar nature. So in order to do that, I would have to identify what type of building, because it's a mixed use. So you have a building, you have a hospital, you have landscaping, and those areas or those elements of the mixed use must be aligned or must be compared against some benchmarks that are or similar nature. That's the approach
So
that I've done.
if you get your
Cost
benchmark rate, what do you then need to consider? If you take a project from Abu Dhabi, but it's in Saudi Arabia?
Yeah, I would apply, like we are using some like BCIS, which is a reference for which has a reference for location factor, and we would apply that to the cost.
Okay.
In case it's on the different location.
Okay, yeah. And you've mentioned a lot about value engineering. What is value engineering?
Value engineering, it is a technique that is being used in order to improve the cost of a project without affecting the functionality, or improving the functionality at the least cost. Yeah.
Okay, so that's value engineering. Do you know what value management is?
Yeah, value management is more of like a technique, an approach being used from inception to completion, or to the end use of the project, like the whole life cycle of the project. So in terms of technique, it has the same as value engineering. However, in terms of scale, it will start from inception to the end use of the. So like.
And you also mentioned that you'd worked on facades before in your summer of experience. So what considerations would you need to make if you were going to retain a facade?
What? Sorry?
What considerations would you need to make if you were going to retain a facade?
To retain a facade? Not sure. Okay. Can I come back to you then?
Yeah. So you also had a project in your summary of experience addressing steel reinforced steps on a beach. What type of steel reinforcement you might find?
Yeah, these are the stainless steel reinforcement. Since the project is to be built in seawater, so there would be it would be prone to corrosion. So a stainless steel reinforcement was used, and aside from that, there was also a proposal to use a fiber reinforced concrete, which was the one I selected when I advised the client, since that one will not be too much prone to corrosion, as is using fiber material, and it strengthens the concrete more in comparison with the usage of stainless steel. because
Okay, yeah,
in
no.
due time it will still have corrosion.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll stop you there. So you also mentioned that you've done monthly valuations. Did you ever have to deal with materials in your valuations?
In my valuation, in terms of payment,
Yeah,
yeah,
the monthly valuation.
in terms of material, whenever in my project in Loop Abu Dhabi, we have provision for materials on site, and in which we value that as part of the payment recommendation to the
Okay.
client.
That's fine. And what about materials offsite? How would you address that?
Actually, it's not included in the contract, but as far as I know, materials of site are those materials that have not yet been shipped to the main site. And but if it's included in the contract, then this must also be part of the payment recommendation. And in order to do that, we must have like a vesting certificate, which we must prove that such material will be transferred is transferred under the name of the client, so that it's actually I mean, the contractor is entitled to be paid with such material.
Okay. And how would you also said you worked assessing variations under the contract. How do you evaluate a variation? Or how do you value variation? Sorry.
So yeah, in terms of valuing variation, in our contract, since it's a lump sum contract, we have first I must identify whether the material or the item is has a similar work in the schedule of rates or the bill of quantities. And if that's not the case, and if it's of a similar nature but a different size, we will use prorate. And if there's no other option but not to use, I mean, if I'm not, it's not in the bill of quantities of similar nature, I would quote for different, I mean, from different companies and use star rates to update, I mean, to build up the rates for such.
And when would you ever value a variation using day rates?
Day work rates?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
When the engineer instructed the work, day work basis, so that's the time I would use the day work rates. And sometimes day work rates are also used when building up star rates. So, however, in our project in the Loop Abu Dhabi, we noticed that the day work rates are much higher than the normal market rates. That's why it's not been used during the building up of star rates.
When would you use them?
Sorry.
When would you use them?
We will use them when basically the contract states that it must be used when it's instructed on a day work basis.
Okay. Okay, and one more then. Can you tell me what process you would go through if a contractor becomes insolvent?
If the contractor becomes insolvent, I would assist them in I would what do you call this? I will liaise this with the client because to ask the employer to consider some of the payment applications that they like, for example, there were deductions in their payment application. In order to assist them in their cash flow, being insolvent is it will also affect the construction that are they implementing on site. So it would be better if there will be some kind of negotiation between client and the contractor.
Okay. I'll stop you there. I'll let Tom.
Hi, Roy. Yeah, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about procurement and tendering to start with. You mentioned in your summary of experience that on a power plant project, you used the design and build procurement route. How would you advise the client manages quality when using a design and build procurement route?
First of all, in the contract, I would advise him to allow for liquidated damage to protect him from the risk of having the risk in the quality of the product, because when you have a design and build, the client has no control over, has limited control over the design of the contractor. So in addition, there should be like professional indemnity insurance that must be in place, because the contractor is going to design the project. So in order to protect the client from any damages resulting from the design of the contractor being, in order for him to recover something which is a result of non-due diligence of the contractor in their design. So that would protect him from that.
So that would be a remedy if something went wrong. How would you prevent that from going wrong? How do you stop it getting to the point where we have to rely on insurance?
Yeah.
What mechanisms would
in
you
order to that, there must be the employment requirement, which is used to facilitate the contractor to design a certain project. The employer's requirement must be very clear and comprehensive, at least comprehensive, and so that the contractor has the idea, or has the complete idea what he needs to construct.
Okay, thank you. When comparing two tenders, how would you decide who is the most suitable?
When comparing two tenders, we must not only look at the cost, because sometimes it could be perceived that the lesser cost will be the most competitive tenderer. We must make sure that the scope of works are aligned with what the requirement of the client, and aside from that, the quality, and that I will ensure that I coordinate that with the design team, that make sure that they are complied with, and the items are all priced in terms of the BOQ that we have provided to them during the tender stage. So yeah.
Okay, so if you hadn't used a bill of quantities, which in design and build you probably don't have a bill of quantities, how would you compare two tenders? So like for like, how would you make sure that you're comparing them fairly?
We will use the elemental in my project in line site. I did a design and build tender analysis, and we use an elemental breakdown of works, because if you will use it it would be difficult to compare one design to another. So we use an elemental analysis in order to.
So was that included in the tender documentation, that one of the requirements of the tender was that it was broken down into a particular format?
Yeah, we need to include that in order for the contractor to or the tenderer to price and to summarize them on that format, and for us as a consultant to facilitate us to analyzing the tender that was submitted to us or issued to us.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to project financial control and reporting then. Could you just explain to me how a standard form of contract would manage change control? You can use examples of contracts you've used if you'd like.
Yeah. Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so project financial control and reporting, how would a standard form of contract manage change control?
Yeah, a standard form of contract will manage change control. Like for example, in Abu Dhabi, we have or in Etihad project, we have the form of contract which is a traditional. Form of contract which is PDIC Red Book 1999, and it's in a lump sum contract. In the contract, it includes change management procedures. Where it includes change management procedures that we can use or adapt in order to control change. And during the first stage of the project, we also have this. I mean, we establish a flow chart based on the contract that we are using, and make sure that all the parameters that are included in the contract are within the change management process, and that
Okay,
would be agreed together with the client.
specifically talking about FIDIC then, what clause in the FIDIC Red Book deals with variations?
The clause 13, of the FIDIC Red Book.
Okay, and you said you use a 1999 version of the
Yeah,
contract. What's the most up-to-date version?
The 2017, and if I can elaborate what 2017 are mostly related to, for example, there is a late notification or from the engineer, or late response from the engineer. It would be deemed as deemed as considered to be approved. And another one is DAAB. It's from DAB it became DAAB, which is
Right,
dispute
that's okay.
adjudication.
I didn't ask what the changes
Yeah,
were.
sorry.
So I'm going to move on to my next question. How do you monitor the progress of a project using a cash flow?
Using a cash flow, I manage the cost of the project by checking whether the actual payment or actual cost of the project is moving in a way that if you compare it against the budget, it's not exceeding. So yeah, that's how we manage.
But how would you analyze the progress on site using the cash flow? How would the numbers inform you of progress?
Yeah, that would I would have to check the progress on site, and if, for example, if the project is 50% completed, I will have to multiply it with the overall cost, and then I will compare it against the cost and the actual cash flow that the cash flow that was established in terms of progress.
Okay, so would you be able to assess, if you couldn't get to site, could you be able to have an idea of progress based on applications, as an example?
Actually the progress of the project will be usually we have this monthly progress report together with the client and the contractor, and the contractor is submitting the monthly progress report with the percentages of the completed.
Okay. Roy, we're going to move on to contract practice, just for my final questions. Could you mentioned that you know about JCT and FIDIC. Can you give me some examples of the different suites for JCT, the different options?
For JCT, as far as I know, there's a standard building JCT standard building form of contract. So and that includes the approximate quantities, bill with approximate quantities, bill without quantities, bill of quantities with quantities, bill of quantities bill with quantities, bill with approximate quantities, and without quantities. So that's the form of contract. And for FIDIC, I have the FIDIC Red Book 99, FIDIC Red Book, which is a suit which is a suit for traditional building procurement, and we also have the FIDIC Yellow Book, which is intended for design and build, and the FIDIC White Book for FIDIC Silver Book for design and build with operation. Design and build.
Okay, final question. We're going to move on to your contract practice. On the Louvre project, your client wanted cost certainty. You advised that they use the Yellow Book 1999 from FIDIC. How does the Yellow Book provide cost certainty?
Yeah, for the FIDIC Yellow Book, it provides cost certainty in terms of Yeah, let me come back to that. Sorry.
Yep, no problem. We can come back to that. That's taken me to the end of my time for the questions. So, Chairman, I think it's over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Thank you, Jamie. Roy will discuss a few RICS related issues now, ethics, standards. So, are you aware of the global professional and ethical standards?
Yes, I'm aware of it.
Can you name?
Yeah. The
the
five
standards?
ethical and global standards are act with integrity, act in a way that promotes trust in profession, take responsibility, be respectful of others, and what else? What the
That's
other one?
Yeah, that's 4. Do you know the other one?
Act with integrity, act in a way that promotes trust in profession, treat others with respect, take responsibility, and always maintain a high standard of service.
Okay. Now, in terms of integrity, what's your understanding of act with integrity? Can you explain a bit more on the behaviors or what is expected from that?
Okay, to act with integrity means to be honest at all times, to be trustworthy, being not affected or biased with any decision that you will make. In case there is a conflict of interest, you would maintain your ability to not to be biased against any circumstances. Like when there's an ethical dilemma, we must maintain that. So,
Okay. Can you give any examples of providing a high standard of service? What does that? What's your
yeah,
understanding of?
when you provide a high standard of service, it means that you must not you must only act on the scope that you are. I mean, when you must act only on the scope that you can carry out. If it's outside your scope, you must not you must not do it, because otherwise you will not be conforming with the standard that was set by the RICS.
So you mean you act within your level of competence
Yeah, level of competence. Yeah.
and expertise? And how would you promote trust in the profession? How would
By
you maintain
yeah.
trust in the
Yeah,
profession?
but by maintaining highest standard to the level required by the RICS, because this can the reason why RICS is trusted by the government bodies because of its high standard. So I believe that when you have a high standard, you are maintaining the high standard of your service to your client. There's some sort of the trust in profession.
Okay, say you have an ethical dilemma. It could be anything that you feel is an ethical issue. Is there anything that RICS produces that helps you determine course of action?
Yeah, whenever I encounter ethical dilemma and I'm not sure of it, I look into the ethics decision tree, where you can find whether is it legal or whatever. So in that ethics decision tree, you would be able to identify whether the decision that you will undertake will cause mean you to not to comply with what has been set by the RICS.
Okay, yeah, that's great. Rules of conduct. Are you aware what the rules of conduct are?
Yeah, there are two rules of conduct for set by the RICS for the members and for the firm.
For the firms, yeah. Do you know what for professional for the rules of conduct for members? What are the key elements within those rules?
Within those rules, we have this interpretation. So, and we also have the communication, which is at which it mentions about what terms of communication will a member have in contact with the RHS, like the use of fax, emails, and what else?
What about
And including the acting with integrity. Sorry.
Yeah, does it talk about ethical behavior?
Yeah, it's about acting with integrity, and we must maintain that we must not be, but we must not allow conflict of interest to. We must not allow ourselves to be affected by any conflict of interest,
Can you give
and
me an
that's part of.
example? Can you give me an example of a conflict of interest?
Like for example, during the time I was working in, I mentioned that in the summary of experience when I was having, a tender, during the tender process, I discovered that one of the tenderers was my best friend, and I mentioned that to my supervisor. Prior to knowing, letting know the client, I asked my supervisor if there's someone who can handle the job, because this might affect my ability to make sound judgment in terms of tender analysis. So I make sure that my colleague will undertake the job that I'm doing.
Okay. Do you know what the differences are between the rules for firms and the rules of conduct for members?
Yeah, firms, it's used for a firm regulated by the RACS. So you would have there the requirement for training, which is not part. Asking. Conducting trainings for its members. So that would not be applicable for members, because in the rules for conduct for member, you will also be required for CPD. Whereas the firm will require, it is
Okay,
required for
that's
the as
fine.
an organization.
Any others?
There's also this advertisement. So yeah, advertisement, which is not in the rules of conduct members, because it's related again to the organization. So and there are also like what they call this complaint handling procedure, which is conducted by the company, where it's
That's
all
fine.
about organizational. The difference is about because it's used for organization and the other one is for individual members.
That's fine, Roy. That's fine. Who is the current president of the RICS?
His name is Clement Lau.
Okay. Couple more questions before we give you an opportunity to wrap up. These days, this modern world, we have a lot of use of social media. What's your understanding of what we should and should not post on social media? Is there any guidance notes from the RICS on this topic?
With regard to posting on social media, I understand that the because one of the ethical standard is to maintain your behavior even in your private life. So in terms of social media, we must not post anything that disrespects people, disrespects the government, and
Have you heard
even
of the
the RICS.
Are you aware of the use of social media guidance for RICS members?
That one, honestly, I have not yet encountered the
Okay.
use for social.
When you become chartered, what is your obligation for CPD to undertake CPD?
To undertake CPD, I must complete 20 hours of CPD each year, and yeah, that's what's being required by the RICS.
Okay. What's your let's okay, we're running out. We've only got a couple of minutes left, so I'll ask you a question. So you arrive on site, Roy, and you find somebody is working on a scaffold, and there's no edge protection on the scaffold. Right. What would you do?
Since the safety is everyone's responsibility, so I will report it to the safety officer that is authorized to maintain health and safety in the area. So once that is done, then the safety officer will have an informed decision what action will he make. And if in case I am on that situation, if the safety officer is not available, if I see that there's a current danger, I would advise that person who's in a risk of accident to tell him that
Oh,
let's
so
be
you could,
careful and yeah.
you would take immediate action if in
Yeah.
case
Yeah.
it was serious.
Yeah.
Okay. We're now coming to the end of the assessment. Roy, is there anything that you would wish to come back to us on?
Actually, the other two questions I wasn't able to. I mean, these two questions I am not sure of what to answer, so I honestly need to.
Okay. So nothing else. Okay. Thank you for your attendance, and you will hear from the RICS in accordance with the timetable for the assessment process. So thank you for your time, Roy. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Okay,
Cheers,
Roy,
Roy.
if you leave now, and then if we can, if you stay, I think, shall we do this, guys? Shall we have like 10 minutes and then we'll get Roy back in for 10, 15 minutes,
Some
yeah?
feedback. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
So Roy, hang around there for a bit and we'll call you, dial you back in about 10, 15 minutes.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
I will.
Thanks.
I believe. Okay. Bye.
Cheers, mate. See you in a bit.
Bye.
Cheers, right.